Hi, everybody. Mr. Denton here, and we're going to go over what is going to be kind of the focus of our April and May here in English 3, which is going to be on the Bildungsroman, which is a term that may be kind of hard to say, but it's something we definitely got to get ready for because that is going to be our major focus. In the remote learning expectations, I had this particular blurb in there, and this is what you kind of need to go back to. This is going to be your targets, what you need to know, what you need to demonstrate, what you need to show proof that you have learned over the upcoming weeks here is going to be these three things. Do you know the formula of the plot diagram, which we've gone over a lot with The Great Gatsby? Can you identify the Bildungsroman plot elements that go along with that? And then can you identify the personal connections to Bildungsroman literature? Again, when in doubt, go back to these three things. This is what you have to demonstrate if you want to get the credit in the class here. So what I want to kind of go over is what a Bildungsroman is. So I got this cool slideshow that I have in here. I'll have it on iTunes U as well that you can browse, but I figured I'd kind of go along with this and so you can kind of go back and get some more information if you need. So a Bildungsroman is right there. What it essentially is, it's kind of right there. It's a coming-of-age story. By the end of this slideshow, you should be able to do the following. Number one, define the words Bildungsroman, protagonist, epiphany, and dynamic character. And secondly, you should also be able to know what is unique about each part of the Bildungsroman. It's very important that you understand how each of these fits into the plot diagram because that is the skill that we are focusing on. So, long story short, here's what we got. A common style of literature in our society is called a Bildungsroman. What it basically is, and then here's a pronunciation in case you're having a tough time with it, Bildungsroman, is it's a German term that means coming of age. So basically that's what it is. It's a super, super common aspect that is looked at in movies and books and everything across the board where it's someone matures along the line. There's specific criteria that need to be in it to make it a Bildungsroman, but long story short, it's the protagonist, main character has to grow more maturely. Oftentimes, a Bildungsroman is about a teenager growing up. The focus of the story is on achieving emotional maturity, not just getting older. A Bildungsroman is not a story where the person just gets older. They have to mature emotionally. But traditionally, it involves someone that is young and has to kind of grow up. So you have seen a million of these, whether you know them or not. So here's some really classic examples of things that you will probably recognize. The Great Gatsby that we just finished, that's a Bildungsroman, okay? Nick grows more mature. By the end, he realizes I need to not be childish and hang around with these people doing bad things. I need to mature and grow up with my life. The Lion King, Simba, is a young, innocent boy at the beginning, and all of a sudden, after everything that happens and his uncle takes over, he says, I have to kind of step up, and he takes a personal journey to be the new Lion King. The Hunger Games, if you're familiar with that, Katniss has to step up and volunteer and go on her journey to discover herself and her strengths in order to survive the Hunger Games. Spider-Man movies, in fact, we've talked about this. A lot of Marvel movies the exact same way. Peter Parker, he's a young kid, naive, doesn't really kind of get it, and all of a sudden he's given these powers and he has to figure them out and balance the responsibility of who he is versus being a superhero. There's tons of other ones out there. There's Harry Potter, the Karate Kid, The Matrix, Star Wars. Lord of the Rings. It's all these things it's a huge, huge, huge. Anything that's kind of big, mature story is probably a Bildungsroman. So you know what they are, but can you identify the criteria that goes along with it? So here is the plot diagram for it. Okay, so we know what this is. We spent quite a bit of time going on with this, but what you need to understand is within each one of these, there's a criteria. So to make it a Bildungsroman, in the exposition, you have to have this criteria. In the exposition for the conflict, you have to have this criteria. For the rising action, it's this criteria. So on and so forth. This slide is probably going to be the one that is your best friend. This is what you need to come back to constantly. Everything you need to know is in this particular section. What I want to kind of do with you right now is go through each section individually so that you can kind of get some more explanation. But this is kind of the too long didn't read snapshot. Please come back to this, okay? So, at the beginning of the particular Bildungsroman, the exposition is the beginning of the story. We learn who the main character is, where the story is set, and what the conflict is. Again, character setting and mood, exposition, you know what that is. However, But besides just being able to identify that, in a Bildungsroman, we learn the protagonist is foolish or uneducated. That is a huge part of it. The main character is young, naive. He or she doesn't get the world yet, probably because of their age. That has to be in there. That's a huge part of it. And he or she is in conflict with society due to his or her immaturity. They don't quite get it. Again, in Nick, he keeps getting told secrets and getting places he doesn't want to. He's dragged around. He doesn't quite, get things. In Simba, the whole time he's like, I don't need this. I don't need this. And it's not until all the tragedy that befalls him that he has to kind of step up and figure those things out. So that's what it is. The main character in a Bildungsroman is foolish or uneducated. Your tasks are going to be reading Bildungsromans and being able to go, after I read this, boom, right there. That's how the main character is being foolish or uneducated. Boom, there's an example of the main character being foolish or uneducated. That's the skill, what we're going for here. Okay, moving on is the inciting incident. Now, the inciting incident goes along, again, you can see down here, it goes along with the intro to conflict. The intro to conflict in a Bildungsroman is called the inciting incident. The main idea here is it pushes the protagonist into her journey even though he or she may not want to go. Again, that's a huge part of it. In a Bildungsroman, the main character is thrust into this. They don't necessarily choose to go, they're pushed into it. The Great Gatsby, Nick did not, he moved there, but then being sucked into this world, he was pushed to go to Chicago to hang out with Tom and Myrtle. Okay, Simba leaves Pride Rock after Stampede kills Mufasa. He's thrown. He has no choice. His father dies. He is thrust out. In the Hunger Games, Katniss chooses to volunteer because she has no choice. Her sister has to go. She has to do it. So the main character in the inciting incident is what happens that pushes the main character into his or her journey. In the rising action, this is obviously the main part of the book. The strongest and the longest part of the book is going to be the rising action. Now, during this, we're going to see the character journey toward maturity. You're going to see the main character try to figure out what is going on and how to navigate this world. One of the keys here is the main character will go through trials, failures, and challenges. I'll repeat that. In a Bildungsroman, the character has to go through trials, failures, and challenges as they wrestle with their place in the world. That's a huge part of it. They have to fail, fall flat in their face, try to do things and not succeed. Again, in The Great Gatsby, Nick goes to parties he doesn't want to go to. He gets drunk. He cheats on his girlfriend. He dates Jordan. All these things that he doesn't really want to do, but he kind of is thrust into it, and he fails along the way. He does things that are against his nature. Again, going back to The Lion King, Simba parties with Timon and Pumbaa. He disappoints Nala. He does things that does not contribute to his maturity, and he gets lost along the way. That's a part of the Bildungsroman. Now, the big thing in this one, obviously, and the part of the book everyone looks forward to is, of course, the climax. Now, the climax in a Bildungsroman is known as an epiphany. Now, an epiphany is defined as like a sudden realization. It's that light bulb going up over your head like, oh, aha, now I get it. It's some type of moment where the main character understands, okay, I get it now. I get it now. At the climax of Bildungsroman, the character will have that epiphany, and at that point, he or she will be like, now I know what to do next. This is the turning point in the story because now the main character knows what it takes to be a part of that world. We see an epiphany in the final Harry Potter book, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Harry understands, oh my God, he has the realization, I have to sacrifice myself to Voldemort if I want to save Hogwarts and all of my friends. Back to The Lion King. When Simba sees Mufasa in the cloud, Mufasa says, remember who you are. Boom, Simba gets it now. He has an epiphany that, now I know what I must do. So again, don't use these terms interchangeably. They're not the same thing. The climax is when the main conflict is solved. In a Bildungsroman, it's when the character has the epiphany. Moving forward, the final part of the plot diagram is the resolution. This is how life is changed and what the new normal life for the main character is. When the main character has his or her epiphany, they now get the world. But the thing that happens in Bildungsroman, we usually don't get closure about what happens. For example, in The Great Gatsby, once Nick realizes, I don't want to be a part of this world, forget you, Tom, forget you, Jordan, I'm moving back home, we don't know what happens to him. We don't know if he's successful or what happens, because the thing is, as frustrating as it may be, it doesn't matter. In a Bildungsroman, it is about the aha moment. It's about the epiphany. It's about realizing. It's not about having a nice ending where the character, all of a sudden lives happily ever after. Usually in a Bildungsroman, you don't find out what happens to the main character, but you take solace in the fact that he or she knows that they have the tools to make it in the world from now on. Their journey at this point is complete. Okay? Moving on to the last slide. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to talk about is the idea of a character. We know from earlier English classes, you have static characters, dynamic character. So in a Bildungsroman, the main character has to be dynamic. They change throughout the story. The protagonist has to be dynamic. At the beginning of the story, he or she is less mature and doesn't fit in. At the end, he or she is more mature and knows what it takes to get along society. Bildungsroman main characters have to be dynamic. They have to change. The bigger idea, too, is as you get throughout the novel or the piece, you have to see how has the character changed and escalated. We saw that in The Great Gatsby, that the events that happened in like chapters 6 and 7 and closer to the end of the book were much bigger. The stakes were higher for Nick and the people around him, as opposed to what happened in, say, chapter 4. This is the same thing. In a Bildungsroman, after the inciting incident, the character tries to find his or her way. Well, the closer they get to figuring that out, the stakes get higher, and you'll see that the events that happen to them become more meaningful, stronger, possibly more violent, but it becomes a bigger deal to the character until it becomes oftentimes a borderline life or death situation. So hopefully you've understood what a Bildungsroman is. There's plenty of resources on the internet that explain this as well. So if you need more help with this, please let me know. But this is going to be what we are focused on. If you know this and you can identify this in a novel, you're in great shape. All right, thanks for listening.